Welcome to this Denver7 News Black History Month presentation. Throughout the month, we've been gathering stories about everyday Coloradans doing extraordinary things, all in an effort to make our Colorado even better. In recent years, I learned something and I want to share it with you. Every year, there's a national theme for Black History Month. This year, the national theme is African Americans and Labor, which focuses on Black contributions and experiences in various industries. So over the next half hour, together, we'll uncover several of those stories, not only by looking at the past, but the present and future as well. Now, speaking of the future, we talk a lot about healthcare on Denver7, everything from access to providers. In our first story during this special presentation, I'm introducing you to a group of nurses on the forefront of a medical specialty that's out of this world.
4-stage engine start. 3.
Nurses in space.
Boosters ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1.
This isn't a far-out goal, but an active plan.
Back to the moon and beyond.
If we are going to
Control Houston, all good calls so far.
have a colony on the moon, we need actual health care. And that's what nurses do.
Registered nurse Robin Bruce says the blueprint for this already kind of exists.
Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4.
Well, so we've had aerospace since the 1950s, right? And we have nurses that do flight for life. Most people think about that. You have the combat nurse that picks up our soldiers from the front lines and bring them back and give them care.
Bruce is the immediate past president of the Colorado Council of Black Nurses. Founded in 1973, the nonprofit focuses on support, scholarship, and now providing healthcare in space, even creating an aerospace nursing department, garnering interest from the aerospace industry.
As CC Munich Aerospace, we're able to get a foot in the door, and then they learn about us. And so now, of course, they don't call us CC Munich Aerospace, they call us the Black Nurses.
Black nurses, pushing the entire profession light years ahead. But not too long ago, it was Black nurses who were denied something as simple as a formal certification.
My mother was one of those kind of people. She was what now we call them doulas.
Council member Dr. Margie Cook, a doctor of philosophy and nursing who worked as a registered nurse for decades, remembers her own personal challenge of trying to follow in her mother's healthcare footsteps.
I wanted to go to a state school, but I was not allowed to go to the University of Texas medical school. So I came to Denver to go to school, and I was accepted at Loretta Heights College, which was an all-girl white school, but it didn't matter. The nuns accepted me all right.
Cook graduated on time and began searching for work.
My mother had asked me to come back to Galveston to work, and I went down and applied, but they told me that I would only be able to work at night from 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock because they didn't want the patients to wake up and see that I was a Black nurse. So I refused to do that.
Cook went back to Denver to start working and eventually met the women who would start the Colorado Council of Black Nurses.
We got together and decided that we needed to make a group that would support Black people in nursing and in medicine too, and would help our people get better care in the hospitals.
Another founding member of the council was Robin Bruce's mother.
And so I had great role models in nursing. I was originally a combat-trained flight nurse by the Air Force. I went into the Wyoming Air Guard. And because I knew we had aerospace nursing, I thought, well, this would be a great segue to teach the students of today to go into nursing. Did not know that NASA made nurses non-qualified to go to space. So then our focus changed to, okay, we have to convince the world that nurses belong in space.
Bruce and the council are working with MSU Denver and Pikes Peak College to create advanced degrees in aerospace nursing.
What do you think about just that journey of Black nurses and now being at the forefront of something pretty incredible?
Well, for me, I don't see it as incredible. I just see it as a normal progression, right? And that's because the nurses in this organization taught me that I'm here for a purpose, right? And that we're all here for a purpose. We're here to do our duty to give back to our communities, to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have the best health care possible.
Bruce says the Colorado Council of Black Nurses hosts a space expo every year, and they're hoping more members of the space community will get involved. We have more information on Denver7.com. If you're interested in learning more, just search for this story. Journalism is an industry that is ever changing, like many professions throughout our country. And while the industry is still behind in many ways when it comes to representation and more specifically, who is telling stories and producing news, as a whole, we have made some progress. And that's partly because of the next person I want to introduce you to. In the journalism world, she rarely needs an introduction. She's Colorado's own Sandra Dillard. Oh, wow. Oh, I love this photo.
Which one?
This one.
Oh, that's how I looked like when I first started at the Post.
1972.
Yeah, I started there September 1st, 54 years ago.
Journalist Sandra Dillard shares what it took to get to that day, all those years ago, when her full-time journalism career would officially begin.
I had my first published article when I was 9 in Sacramento. I minored in journalism. I didn't think I'd ever be one. I was a teacher. Like every other black woman in my age group, started teaching school when I was 21. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So how old were you when you finally said,
Older than that. Go next.
In 1971, Dillard landed a spot in a prestigious summer journalism program.
So the Denver Post agreed to sponsor me. It was called the Summer Program for Minority Journalists. It was not a remedial program. Keep in mind, I was already finishing up my master's. And I was in the journalism program at Columbia right after the Kerner Commission report.
The Kerner report examined civil unrest in the U.S. in the 1960s and also criticized media outlets for not hiring black journalists.
So after the summer program, you go back to the Post full time.
I started at the Post full time.
You were the first black female reporter there.
Yeah.
Were there any?
As far as I know, I was the only one in the state. Wow. Yeah. This is me fussing.
I am a reporter, not the receptionist.
Because they assumed I was the secretary and not a reporter like the rest of the people in the room.
That had to be frustrating.
It was frustrating. George Lane, I would go to him about everything, including things that I thought were racist and were, things I thought were sexist. And he would tell me what to do or what not to do.
And Dillard would end up becoming a mentor herself to thousands of journalists.
Let's talk about NABJ.
Okay, let's talk about it.
How did you become a founder of the National Association of Black Journalists?
I was back there for the Black Congressional that thing that they have every year. They have about a week of workshops and speakers.
In D.C.?
Yes, and I was on one of the panels, and I was told about it when I was there and urged to come to the meeting, and I came, and I thought, this is a good thing.
Today, the latest statistics from Pew Research shows there are more black journalists in the U.S. than when Dillard started. But still, just 6% of U.S. journalists identify as black. Dillard says, proving how much organizations like NABJ are needed.
And I'm just amazed at how NABJ has grown and prospered.
What is your favorite accomplishment of it all? You have so many awards. What are you most proud of?
My son.
Dillard was a divorcee, raising Alton Dillard on her own with help from her mother.
I like to say I was raised in the newsroom, which I literally was. And so watching how she went about her job in the old days where you had to do things like pull physical paper wire copies. I appreciate my mom both for just being a great mom and for what she's done in the space of journalism.
From Denver Post general assignment reporter to theater critic, Dillard's career took her around the world and won her many awards. She had job offers from other prestigious papers, but Dillard chose to stay in her beloved Denver, doing the job that changed her life and others whose lives may have otherwise been overlooked.
I would say it's the best job you can have. You can learn. It's like going back to school. You know, it really is.
I was recruited for my job here at Denver7 at an NABJ career fair, the same NABJ Sandra Dillard founded. Sandra has helped pave the way for me and so many others, and I am truly grateful for you, Sandra. Coming up, a decades-old social club teaching generations of Black Coloradans etiquette while celebrating excellence. We're taking a look back at the Owl Club of Denver next. This Black History Month, Denver7 is taking a look back at a Denver social club that's celebrating 84 years of serving the community while also being featured at the History Colorado Museum.
The Waltz of the Bells. Once you hear the music, it's just so infectious that, like I said, we just enjoy performing the same waltz for the last 73 years.
A charming tune, white gowns, and a debutante ball, organized by a club in Denver, redefining class.
This is my dad. This is C.T. Smith. And my grandmother, Ernestine Smith, and my grandfather, G.W., or George Washington Smith, Jr.
And what year was this taken?
This picture was taken in 1964. I really like what they're wearing, too. We don't see folks dress up like this much anymore, except for when we go to the debutante.
It started with a much smaller party. In 1941, 8 railroad pullmen, waiters, and businessmen would get together in their free time, playing cards and laughing late into the night.
When you go back in time and understand about segregation, understand about some of the obstacles, some of the threats, and the challenges that a lot of our men experienced, and coming together to lift each other up, coming together to what I call have a little black joy.
In 1949, the group received its charter, officially becoming the Owl Club.
So their wives, started to just call them, you guys are just like a bunch of night owls, just hanging out all the time.
Ronald Washington has been an Owl Club member for 23 years.
Just growing up in the Denver community, I knew a lot of the members of the Owl Club, and they were mentors, they were teachers, they were Cub Scout leaders, they were just everything.
They were also veterans and community leaders like Tuskegee Airman Captain and first Black Denver Board of Education President Omar D. Blair and World War II veteran and lawmaker Elvin Caldwell.
It's just an honor to be with these gentlemen and to carry on what our founders had begun in 1941. So we're trying to uphold that legacy, and I proudly do so.
The joy of a social club eventually turned into a mission to celebrate the academic excellence of young African-American women in Denver and provide scholarships like notable debutante former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice.
The criteria would be your grades and community service. You didn't have to have a legacy or money.
An exhibit at History Colorado celebrates the unique American story of excellence of the Owl Club through photos. But the party hasn't stopped. Members still meet every 2 weeks. In June, 25 young ladies will receive scholarships and continue the tradition of dancing the Waltz of the Bells at the club's 74th debutante cotillion.
This tradition is so critical because there's so much that we're bombarded with about who we are not. We are constantly berated, constantly denigrated, and this debutante presentation for me changes the narrative. It uplifts, it celebrates.
Jessica Porter, Denver7.
The Owl Club headquarters was recently listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. You can check out History Colorado's Owl Club of Denver exhibition through May 10th at the History Colorado Center downtown. Admission is free for kids 18 and under. During a time when federal rollbacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are trickling down to all kinds of entities, from corporations to schools, former Denver Mayor Michael Hancock is launching a History Fellowship. The Hancock Heritage Fellowship will send 10 to 12 high school sophomores and juniors to the Deep South to visit historic sites and museums. During his first interview since leaving office, Hancock told me about the inspiration behind this.
It was about a month after leaving office that I decided to embark upon a solo drive across the Deep South. It was my way to kind of just, decompress, re-energize, and just kind of let it all go and enjoy myself. So I flew into Louisiana, spent 3 days there, and then went into Mississippi, into Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and ultimately into Richmond, Virginia, where I concluded it. Almost 3,000 miles, 21 days, solo. But while I did it, Mike, I tell you, I spent time to visit all the historical civil rights sites, African American history sites that are significant in our journey here. Former slave plantations, some of the great new museums in Alabama and South Carolina.
Hancock says it was an emotional and very educational experience, one he hopes to share with the next generation. If you or someone you know is interested in applying, head to hancock-foundation.org. Applications are due March 12th. Coming up, the history of the Black community and cannabis is a complicated one, from criminalization to legalization and continued barriers to ownership in this multi-billion-dollar industry. We take a look at all of it after the break. Cannabis is a topic we've covered quite a bit here on Denver7 for about 15 to 20 years. And while we've uncovered some of the inequalities within the industry for people with previous convictions, right now we're taking a look at the cannabis industry's history and specifically, in honor of Black History Month, its impact on the Black community.
We carry all of the Black-owned products that are produced here in Colorado.
Colorado's own Wanda James is the first Black dispensary owner in the United States.
And it has kind of a lemony smell to it. Going back to 2009, cannabis was very different. It wasn't a billion-dollar enterprise. It wasn't something that everybody wanted to be in. We literally sat down with our attorneys, and our attorneys told us, when you open up this store, you are going to give the government a rock-solid case to put you in jail for 25 years. 3 mayors, 2 former governors here in Colorado all came out against cannabis. 2009 was when we opened up Apothecary of Colorado.
And James says the 2009 dispensary opening moment was pivotal after years of trying to end the war on drugs, a war she says has disproportionately impacted Black and Latino Americans.
It was for about $164 worth of street weed that landed my brother a 10-year prison sentence. 4 of those years, my younger brother picked cotton in Texas to purchase his freedom. Quick history lesson, hemp was supposed to be America's cash crop. George Washington grew hemp, Ben Franklin grew hemp, it was everywhere.
According to the National Institutes of Health, cannabis is indigenous to many African countries where people used it as medicine. But James says historically, negative stereotypes have been placed on Black Americans who use cannabis, and even the term marijuana became a way to associate the drug with negative depictions of Latinos' use of it.
So that's why we don't use the word marijuana, because it is a slang term, it is derogatory. So we prefer cannabis. Let's be real, the war on drugs is a war on Black people and a war on Latinos.
A 2021 Colorado Division of Justice report found even after recreational use legalization in Colorado, Black Coloradans' cannabis arrests are double that of white Coloradans.
Still so many people of color, African Americans specifically, in the South that are doing long sentences, 10, 20, 30 years, even life for cannabis while it's regulated as well.
Sarah Woodson is the owner of the Cannabis Experience.
How did your relationship with cannabis begin?
I kind of dibbled and dabbled a little in cannabis, but I've always been an entrepreneur. Then, as I got a little older, I had a negative experience with cannabis. My husband had a cannabis felony, and it really put a toll on the household.
Legalization didn't include automatic expungement for previous cannabis crimes. So for a while, people with previous convictions were blocked from starting legitimate, now legal businesses. In 2019, Woodson started Color of Cannabis to change that.
We spearheaded the social equity program on a state level, and then the city of Denver opted in. And the whole entire purpose of this program was to create new opportunities, which people would call low-hanging fruit. And that was to have a cannabis hospitality license and a cannabis delivery program.
But many big dispensaries refused to partner with social equity delivery businesses, those owned by Coloradans with previous cannabis convictions.
The people that have profited the most off social equity have not been Black and brown people.
Who have they been?
White owners.
White owners with maybe previous convictions?
Exactly, yep.
How does that make
And money.
Still illegal at the federal level, cannabis remains an all-cash business. And today in Colorado, just more than 3% of Colorado cannabis business owners identify as Black. But as the cannabis landscape changes and more states move toward regulation and legalization, Woodson says she remains hopeful.
Black people are always going to overcome, that, and that's the truth. And not only a song, but that is what our history is in this country. We overcome, we thrive, and that will happen.
Woodson and James say it has to happen so that current Colorado Black cannabis business owners aren't the only or the last.
We know cannabis is a very layered topic, and the parts we covered in this story are just a portion of it. This is a story that is continually evolving, and will continue to cover its impact on our Colorado and specifically communities of color. This next story is about guns. Not a shooting, not an arrest, just the simple act of owning a firearm. Black gun ownership has been on the rise in the U.S. since 2019, but many Black community members feel they've been left out of the responsible gun ownership conversation. I talked to 2 gun owners who say that's in part due to stereotypes. And through art and education, they're challenging stereotypical narratives.
A quiet gallery displaying everyday people, showing off something 32% of Americans report they own: a gun.
I never saw anybody in my hometown with a firearm in a positive way.
This is artist Christian K. Lee's exhibit at the Colorado Photographic Arts Center called Armed Doesn't Mean Dangerous.
My father, who was a Chicago area police officer, I just knew that he couldn't be the only person who was legally carrying a firearm. Those are the type of images that I was seeking to create.
A grandmother, a couple, a neighbor who loves to host barbecues. Even though Black Americans are very much a part of that Pew Research 32% statistic, about 24% of Black Americans are gun owners to be exact, for many, these images feel rare.
I think the narrative has been whatever the Hollywood has portrayed, and they're not always characters that are the hero.
Anubis Haru is the owner of 1770 Solutions, a gun safety and training organization.
We opened up our business right at the beginning of COVID. From there, we were able to train hundreds and hundreds of people in firearm safety and self-protection.
Why 1770?
1770 is the year of the Boston Massacre. A gentleman by the name of Crispus Attucks, along with 5 other individuals, were involved in a clash with the British Redcoats. And unfortunately, Crispus Attucks, a Black man who freed himself from slavery, became a sailor and was also a rope maker. He lost his life.
Haru says from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War, Black access to guns was limited, but Black gun ownership was very much alive.
Bass Reeves was enslaved, and his owner, George Reeves, during the Civil War, he taught Bass how to shoot. Once he freed himself from slavery, he became a U.S. Marshal in Oklahoma and brought over 3,000 outlaws to justice single-handedly. Dr. King, his methods and his political views were nonviolent, but he understood that self-protection was extremely important.
Dr. King applied for a gun permit in 1956, was denied, and later devoted his life to nonviolence.
Historically, there have been some negative things that have taken place in this country perpetuated against Black Americans. In the mind of some people say, hey, if they have access to weapons and firearms and all these different things, they could potentially, retaliate. It's actually the furthest thing from our minds.
Lee says in a way, he could feel invisible barriers to gun ownership until he joined the military.
I was thinking about the idea wow, the United States said that I'm a soldier now, and now, I have the confidence to go buy a firearm. Or I feel like I probably won't be judged as much. I'm very excited that the work to some degree has become like a sociological project. So I'm excited that it can help and challenge people in that way.
Lee and Haru are both challenging stereotypes. Lee through his images, and Haru through owning a gun and teaching others how to legally do so.
Lee's exhibit Armed Doesn't Mean Dangerous ended on February 22nd, but the Colorado Photographic Arts Center is also hosting a History Reimagined exhibit that opens Saturday, March 1st. Thank you so much for watching this special Denver7 Black History Month presentation. We hope these stories have informed and inspired you. And remember, Black history is American history, and we'll continue to tell these stories all year long.